Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Customer Shower Closed Loop podcast. Now, this is really exciting for us because this is the first episode of our new podcast called Closed Loop, where we'll be talking with CX consultants and industry leaders about all things relating to business transformation, customer experience, and voice of the customer programs. So just to introduce myself, my name is Darren Wake, and I'm Head of Customer Success at Customer Shower. And I work with lots of organisations across the UK and overseas in helping them deliver outstanding voice of the customer programs. And I'm delighted to host our new podcast series. Really delighted to welcome our guest today, Alicia Crowther. So today, Alicia is a seasoned strategy and innovation consultant with over 20 years experience. Alicia is the founder of 3 Digital Consulting based in Newcastle upon Tyne. And Alicia has collaborated with organisations worldwide and helped them clarify business models and embrace change through innovative, creative problem solving.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's all right. You're very welcome to be here. Alicia's expertise spans industries including government, edtech, healthcare, financial services, and very many more. Specific organisations that Alicia's worked with include the NHS, Lloyd's, Anglo-American, and the criminal justice system. And it's a real pleasure to have you here,
Yeah,
Alicia.
thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great to have you. So we'd like to just talk about some of the challenges that we find when we work with organisations and really value your input and take on some of these points. So just to set the scene, when we work with organisations, we find insights and what's driving customer satisfaction and ultimately what companies need to focus on to make things better for customers and keeping in mind the business benefits that they want to improve. So whether it be retention or revenue, bottom line growth. Really interested to hear about your take on transformation and making improvements to processes and how best it can be delivered.
Yeah, it's interesting working with different clients because I think a lot of times they don't really know where to start. So a lot of times it's, they think they have a number that they're after, like you said, for retention or sales, but they don't really know how to get there. And so I really enjoy working as a consultant because then I get to come in and kind of bring that outside perspective. So I've worked with other clients, I've worked in different industries, and I can kind of help sometimes narrow in and focus on what that particular area they should focus on. Because I think a lot of times with that transformation, people think it needs to be this big change. We need to bring in AI. We need to, do all these things with technology. And a lot of times there's some small issues that they could take care of that would really help to solve some of those problems. I'm not sure if you've, heard some of your clients talking about that, but even looking at things like returns, for example, or support tickets and things like that. So being able to help customers focus on some of those smaller pieces that can also bring a lot of value.
It's really interesting you talk about that because I think there's a fear with a lot of organisations. There's like an overwhelm of goodness me, to fix things, it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of resource, a lot of effort, or to get different departments involved, and then it becomes a longer, drawn-out process. When you work with organisations, what kind of techniques or how have you approached it to kind of help them almost like demystify it or take away that overwhelm?
Well, I mean, there's so much to it. I think a lot of times, as I mentioned, companies are not really great at measuring value of what they actually want to achieve. So one of the first things that I generally do is try and make sure that they're measuring the right things. So, for example, sometimes when you're working with an app, people think the number of downloads is important, but actually that doesn't really matter. If I download it, it doesn't mean I'm using it. It doesn't mean I'm getting value out of it. So a lot of it is really helping them, I think, kind of first step back and think about what's important here. What are we trying to drive? How are we measuring that? My background is as a research methodologist, so I love to kind of get into the numbers and how we actually measure things in order to be effective. And then I think from there, it's just a matter of, as you said, instead of being the whole pie thing, how do we break that down into smaller tasks in order to kind of get there? So, maybe this whole thing is we need a new customer call center. But in order to get there, how do we do that? We can make some small changes along the way in order to get that effectiveness, that we want to maybe reduced, hang time on calls or reduced, people getting lost in the shuffle. So it's just about taking that big problem. First, you're identifying it and measuring it in the right way. And then secondly, just breaking it down into smaller steps. It's like running, I like to think of it as kind of running a dual track type of transformation, because you will have those big things that are going to be expensive technology changes, and those will take a while. But then it's also, what do we think about that we can do? Maybe it's an ops change. Maybe it's a personnel change. Maybe we need to hire a new type of person. And so it's almost that dual track of, I have a bigger, maybe these are quarterly goals I'm reaching, but then they're smaller, this 2 weeks, this month, what can we achieve to make that change?
Yeah. It's really interesting that. Are there any obstacles that you've encountered in terms of resistance or people being nervous or about changes? And
Yes, all the time. People are it's funny. Some people are afraid of change. Some people don't want to change because they've always done it this way. Some people don't know what the future is, so they don't want to do that. So part of it is really, I almost feel like a little bit of a coach or a therapist, and kind of just getting people comfortable with thinking about things differently. And I think the reality in today's world, we have to change. It is, COVID, the global politics, everything, AI coming in, everything is changing. And so companies really have to get comfortable with that or they'll get left behind. I mean, I definitely feel like we're at a part of a new kind of industrial revolution almost, the AI revolution or whatever you want to call it. But we are changing, and that means consumers are changing and what their expectations are changing. So we have to be comfortable with taking a little bit of risk. And I think, as I said before, for me, I'm an outsider coming in. And so when you're in that day to day, you might not recognize those challenges, but, bringing in someone fresh from outside, then, oh, have you tried this or thought about it in this way? So I think that's when consultants, can really help kind of spearhead almost, or like inject a lightning bolt into that change, so yeah.
I kind of agree with that, actually, definitely, because I think when you're the third party coming in, then you're not tied into the politics and there's a lot of things that you're unaware of. Is actually a good thing, because you're unaware of the grand things what may be going on, or people can say or can't say certain things. I think winning hearts and minds is crucial, actually, and what you mentioned there about bringing people along that journey and making sure people are involved in how that influences them and what that change means for the role they play in that bigger outcome is key, I think.
Yeah, a lot of companies that I've worked with as well operate in very much like structured silos. So, the HR department or the finance department doesn't know what's happening in product. They understand this is our company and this is what we sell, but they don't really understand. And so one thing that I always encourage people to do is not only to work small, but also work in the open. So, have a show and tell where we show this is what we tested this week and this is what happened. Customers didn't like it, so now we're going to do this instead. So again, it's really about being transparent and inviting those other teams, because you're all there for the same purpose, right? You're all there to, help the business and help make it successful. So I think again, you said the word demystify, which I think is a really great way of putting it. It's not magic. We don't have scientists locked away in a room somewhere. It's people that are working on producing, whether it's a service-based business or a product-based business. And really, I think trying to break down those barriers. And, if the finance team understands, then, they are more willing to help unlock maybe parts of revenue to invest in other technology because they understand a bit more. So again, it's bringing everybody together around that common goal and just really working in the open instead of, huddling away in the corner, or this is my, don't look at what I'm doing over here. So being more open. Yeah.
I think that's really crucial as well. And I think when it comes to change or making changes in our experience on making changes that the customer will benefit, so making perhaps operational, behavioral or process changes that will benefit the customer and slicken the customer experience, whether that be kind of an onboarding process or a digital experience, or depending on the business, it might be a renewal, it might be a claim, it might be ordering a product, it might be dealing with a complaint. So there's lots of different events that happen in a customer experience. And we find that the insight team, the CX team, are very much in charge of the measurement, the collecting of feedback, the understanding of that feedback. But really the people that will make the change, that the customers will notice, are the people at the coalface or the people on the front line, whether that be a contact center team, delivery drivers, people in charge of the digital offering. So really the CX team have only got so much influence, really. That key part of that transformation occurs by people that are not them. You know, they've got to kind of communicate it well. I'm just interested in any lessons you've learned along the way about. You've obviously been integral at launching transformation projects and driving change to our organisations. How do you maintain the momentum after kind of launching an initiative or saying, hey guys, we need to focus on improving X, Y, or Z? How do you keep that going?
Yeah, I mean, because that's it. It really is a marathon. It's not, we're going to do this and everything's going to be fine now, because again, everything in the background has changed again through that process. So it is, I mean, really what we were just talking about, it's about being very transparent and working in the open. We tried this, it didn't work, so we're going to try this now. Or we tried this, it got us a little bit closer. Now we're going to double down and do a bit more. So I think, again, it's just being transparent, sharing the learnings. I think companies are, again, back to fears, they're so afraid of failure or losing. And you know, in the strategy and innovation space, you know, we have to be accepting of failure, because these are all guesses, you know, educated guesses. Usually we have some knowledge behind what we're trying to do, but it's okay to fail. That's still a learning, and we still learned, oh well, that didn't work, so how can we change that and then make it into something that does resonate with customers or does you know, increase sales. So I think it's about just keeping that focus on, we're constantly learning. We're never done. You know, it's almost like people say transformation is like a light switch. You know, we turn it on, we're done, we are transformed now. And no, it's a process. So I think it's all of those things, just keeping people educated and up to date, and sharing those wins and those losses too.
Hey, sorry for interrupting the video, but I'll be quick. Now, is your VOC program really making an impact, or are hidden gaps really holding you back? Take our free VOC maturity assessment to get instant insights and actions to improve your VOC program. It only takes 5 minutes, and you'll be closer to take your VOC program to the next level. Click the first comment to find out more. Now, let's get back to the video. I think it's a really good point. I think what I've learned in my career is working with organisations of all shapes and sizes across different sectors is communication and transparency is key, really. And I think working in the customer experience space, where it succeeds most is when it's not kept in a silo. There's clear communication between the stakes and voice of the customer teams and the operational teams that have an impact on the customer experience. Like I say, contact center, all the way down to delivery drivers, all the way down to people who pack a product. Everyone has a bearing on that experience. And I think the voice of the customer will tell you where there are issues that could be better. And hopefully the insight will also tell you where those issues have a profound impact on the measures that matter and the business performance, you know, going back to retention or complaints or customers loving you, customers renewing, or customers going elsewhere. They're the things that businesses want to focus on. But I think what's key is keeping the departments, the people who influence that experience, so engaged, so aware of it all, and sharing the insights with them effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with companies where we've even kind of had like almost a job swap, where, you know, maybe somebody who works in engineering or development goes and sits on a customer call line, or, you know, somebody who works in finance goes out with a delivery driver and sees what it's like. So it's almost, you know, again, you're using that knowledge about your own people internally and how their job is and how difficult it is and how these small changes might help your internal people be more satisfied, which then of course has the knock-on effect of, you know, it's very meta, right? It's the internal satisfaction plus the customer satisfaction. So I think, again, you know, just keeping things open and be constantly in the mindset of wanting to learn, I think is what's really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that whole ethnography of walking a mile in a customer's shoes is so key, and so few business leaders especially do it really, but I think saying, you know, I'm going to leave my desk and go out with a delivery driver, or I'm going to sit in the contact center and listen to calls and do that kind of seeing it from colleagues' point of view consistently is really key as well.
Well, and so many people think they know the customer. You know, I've worked here 20 years. I know what customers want, but you know, they're probably mostly right, maybe 60, 70% right, but there'll be other things that they don't know about, that they didn't realize their product or service was being used in this way. Again, as we said, people are always changing. So your customers are always changing. Their expectations are always changing. You know, when you have the big guys that are doing overnight free delivery and all these other things, you know, so expectations change. change for your customers as well. So it's really important to, no matter who you are in the business, to make sure that you're out there and listening to what people are saying, because you might be surprised. And maybe something you see a customer doing actually is that springboard for innovation to maybe this is a new feature we could do, or maybe this is a new kind of partner product that we could bring on because I can see this is happening in the real world. Yeah,
no, really interesting. I'm just wondering, from your experience, has there been any kind of transformation projects or work you've worked out with the organizations where it's not quite gone as planned and you've had to readjust or pivot into a different direction, and how you've overcome those issues?
Definitely. Well, I think, again, it's about, it's all unknown, right? So we think we have an idea of where we're going to end up or what we need to do. So I think, again, it's about just keeping those goals small so we work towards those. And, there will be times when things don't work. A lot of times, because things weren't kind of set up right from the very beginning and not really being customer led from the very beginning, then we've spent a lot of money and nothing's changed, and we don't actually have that deliverable that we thought we were going to get.
Yes.
So there does need to be some rules and some kind of fencing around what are we actually trying to achieve, keeping it measurable and tight, not just let's spend a bunch of money and see what happens, so we have to have some kind of rules around that, I think. But absolutely, things are not going to go to plan, and we have to be willing to pivot and make those changes because, it's like we said before, things are going to be different. And so we have to be willing to accept that fear and change when something doesn't go right. And so just, if this technology isn't going to work, it's better to test small and find that out now than to try and implement a whole thing and then it doesn't work. And then you're really in trouble. So
really interesting. Something I just wanted to mention or ask your views on is things like A/B testing and testing, like you touched on it there, testing in a small area, and I guess that leads on to my second point about having some sort of measurement or tracking of changes that are made to processes or behaviours or systems that hopefully have a bigger impact on, in our world, the customer experience. But how have you perhaps utilised A/B testing or measurements? What measurements have you used to check the success on that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of when people think about testing within products and services, a lot of it really is based on kind of like prototype testing or user testing. And, A/B, is it this image or this image is going to get more clicks? And you're kind of trying to optimize down to the nth degree.
Yes.
But, there's opportunities to test at any time. And I think companies don't do enough of testing those ideas. And a lot of times it is starting with testing the ideas instead of testing the actual thing, whether it's a website or an app or anything like that. So early and often testing is really, really important. I think, again, just asking people, would they use it? Is this something that's interesting to them? Is this something that, if it was available, what would they pay for it? Or how does that compare to how they do things now? So asking customer those types of questions. And what's difficult as well is that, and I've heard this so many times, well, we tested it and it did really well, but then the customers didn't use it. Again, your job as a strategy person is not to be able to predict human behavior 100%, because we don't know. Humans are funny, aren't they? And they say they're going to do something and then they don't do it. I have teenagers, right? So I know all about that, right? We talked about that. So, it's just this constant always being able to test, and doing those tests more frequently, I think really can help you get to it. We don't really know what people are going to do with something until they get it in their hands or they experience it as a service. So the best that we can do is try and make these educated guesses of, how often they're going to use something and how many times they're logging in and what types of transactions, if it's an app, for example, and just keep trying to measure those things. And I think I wanted to touch on this as well. As we said with optimization, I think a lot of times businesses try and wring like absolutely every penny out of every interaction or every transaction, and they're optimizing for that revenue. But you're going to turn customers off potentially by doing that. If your journeys that you're designing are designed around revenue optimization, the customer doesn't care about that. They just want to buy the thing or do the stuff. So really thinking about, there's a danger in, keeping what you have to constantly keep that in your mind. What's in it for me as the customer, but then what's in it for the business? And those two have to find a happy place to meet in the middle. I think a good example is a streaming service that has recently changed its streaming options because they realized that people were sharing passwords.
Yes.
And maybe my 20-year-old now lives at uni and they still have the same login. And so, that's great. And people love the service, but they're going to go bankrupt if they don't get revenue. So again, it's that real balance between finding that customer satisfaction and customer value, but you have to have that anchor on the business value as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I agree completely. I think often what we see is organizations can sometimes get caught too much into what I often call like the lens of the organization, where they're seeing everything from their own prism point of view. And NPS is a classic example of, how likely would you be to recommend us? Because we only care about how recommending us. And it loses the connection with the customer as opposed to asking about, like you mentioned there, a customer of whatever product or service we use and encounter in our lives. We're inherently selfish as human beings. We just want the outcome that we want. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just want it to happen easily. It happens how we'd like it to happen. It's low friction. And we just get the outcome that we want because we want to move on to other and better things. One of the best ways companies can kind of get a feeling of that is using these like effort scores and things like that. So how easy was it for you to fulfill what you wanted to fulfill, rather than focus too much on what could we do to get you to recommend us to more people, where in many organizations that just doesn't really hold water, really.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of NPS to be quite honest.
Yes.
And again, it's difficult in B2B.
Yeah.
Because, I might love a tool that I use, a messaging tool for work, but I'm not going to tell my friends and family about it. I'm probably not going to talk to my colleagues about it. So yeah, absolutely. Those measures kind of are a little bit more difficult sometimes with the B2B. But again, as you said, if I'm thinking about work, I want to do things that make my life easier. I don't have to copy paste data entry all over the place. So making my effort time less, those are measures that are more important, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, when we look at things like improving customer experiences, and we do some root cause analysis on what's driving dissatisfaction, so why people giving the low scores, you get the detail in the conversations in the comments. And really it's often around lack of communication, lack of updates, lack of clarity. Customers didn't get what they wanted first time. And unless those problems are put out, or the process or transformation work isn't carried out to make things better, then those issues will just snowball, really. And then it results often in repeat calls or worst case complaints being raised, and that's where there's a business cost to the people that higher call volume, higher complaints, higher levels of dissatisfaction, and often customers abandoning or going somewhere else. But I think companies, if they look at where that friction is and focus on making things a bit easier for people, then customers are happy because they're not having to chase and they just get what they want, or they're informed when things go wrong. The client, the organization just ends up getting fewer kind of complaints or people chasing where's this or what's happened here.
Yeah, well, and it's back to what we said before as well about it doesn't have to be a big thing,
No.
So, we don't have to replicate, this company did this, so we have to do it too, And another thing that you mentioned as well is that people say they want this. Well, again, our job within product and service companies isn't to give people what they want. It's to understand what they're trying to do and how can we solve that problem in a better way. Because like we said, people are used to doing things in the way they want. I just need to know this has happened. Okay, we'll send you an email. Well, but is an email the best way? Should it be an app notification? Should it be a postal letter? There's lots of different ways we can solve that problem. So again, I think that goes back to thinking about, experimenting around how could we solve this problem that we see. So kind of being problem oriented instead of feature oriented or, product or service oriented and thinking about that, because, you can find some small ways to really change that dial, and every half a point, in those scores, that adds up over time, doesn't it? So
absolutely. I'm a big believer in marginal gains and one small adjustment here or there. And I think that's what scares a lot of people when they think about transformation or process improvement. It's this big scary world, like we go back to what we talked about at the beginning, but really it might be just changing one thing. If an insight might be, hey guys, you've just got to, things go wrong, things go late, or things don't go as expected from a customer point of view. should we send out SMS notifications at these points in the journey just to keep people informed? And then if we do that, then okay, it's not the ideal outcome, but we're helping put out fires later on,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's a big part of it. People are mostly understanding. You will always have those customers that are going to complain, right? But, people just want to know what's going on. Yeah. And then they won't ring you. And then they won't, add to the call volume or the email support tickets and things like that. So I think, just finding ways to keep customers updated. We understand things happen. Maybe the truck got lost, whatever. It's a funny, again, now you get notifications, such and such delivery company will be, they're 10 stops away now, almost like it's too much information.
Yeah.
We don't need to update people that much necessarily, but, just keeping people, aware and informed of what's happening, I think really can cut down a lot of that noise and makes them more satisfied for sure.
Yeah, no, great. We'll be back for more, Alicia, on another topic. So thank you for watching. I hope you found that really useful. We'd love to know your thoughts and questions or comments. Please get in touch with us on LinkedIn or through other channels, and we'd love to find out what you think to my points, Alicia's points, or if you've got questions for Alicia, then do get in touch. We'll be back for more with another episode of Closing the Loop very soon. Any final thoughts from you, Alicia?
No, I just think, like I said, just don't be afraid. Just try things. Try it today. There's one thing that you could try differently today, and talk to your team about that. So, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thanks.
Thank you.